On June 17th, 1868, Lieutenant Bonsall left his camp number 2, headed for Three Forks. It was about 5:30 in the morning, and he had gotten there the evening before, on the 16th, and he made a notation. He says, "There's no water in the creek at camp number 2. We found plenty of good water by sinking a box in the sand in the bed of the creek. Above the crossing there are a few stunted cottonwood trees along the banks of the stream. No water to be found between Greenwood's camp and the crossing without digging. Grass excellent at the crossing." And so the stunted cottonwood trees back then now are full-grown, big, large cottonwood trees. And we are here near the anniversary. You can almost imagine maybe Lieutenant Bonsall way off in the distance seeing the wagons headed this way. At this point where we're at right now, we're about 5 miles from his camp, camp number 2, and about a mile from Three Forks. So by that, he was probably going about 3 miles an hour. We'll start with a little bit of background with this whole Bonsall situation here, because we consider this our Rosetta Stone of Sand Creek discovery. In 1995, Sherry and I set out to find the real Sand Creek site, because it appeared to be not where they thought it was over these years. So by 1997, we were finding lots of artifacts and mapping teepee sites, from village stuff to battle sites, and had pretty well documented our discovery by 1997, or for sure through 1998. And then something kind of interesting happened. It was either late 98 or early 99. We found some papers rolled up and put into our door handle in our 6th Street house where we lived at the time, and began to look at it, and it was this information on Lieutenant Bonsall. And it turned out to actually prove everything we were already stating as to where Black Kettle's village was. But what he did, Lieutenant Bonsall, he made a journal of his march of his detachment of 10 men, belonged to the garrison of Fort Lyon, and of course it was just Colorado Territory at the time. And Lieutenant Bonsall was a commander of the 3rd Infantry from Old Fort Lyon, and he was going from Old Fort Lyon to Cheyenne Wells. And this was June 15th of 1868. Bonsall, he left 5:30 a.m. June 16th, and he said the weather was clear at Old Fort Lyon. And at 7:30 he said the road was good, runs over high prairie, nearly level with a slight ascent. Road is so high and well drained that it would not be much affected by rain. No wood or water, grass short, buffalo. And then 11 o'clock he says the weather's clear. Halted at this point, 5 hours to graze the animals. Road's good, dry weather, basins would hold water in wet weather, and in very rainy weather would be impassable. Plenty of good water in Rush Creek, also water in pools of Sand Creek where the road approaches nearest to it. From the point where the road runs nearest to Sand Creek to Greenwood's camp, the road shows signs of having been overflowed to the depth of 2 to 4 feet. Plenty of driftwood near Greenwood's camp. Grass is good, a few small cottonwood trees on Sand Creek. And at 6 p.m., weather clear. For 3 or 4 miles after leaving Greenwood's camp, the road has been overflowed and the balance of the way high and dry. So Lieutenant Bonsall coming out here to the site of the Sand Creek battle that happened 3.5 years earlier, 1864 November. He took 2 days getting here. The soldiers just took 1. They traveled all night long from Fort Lyon, left there about 8:30 in the evening, getting out of Sand Creek about sunup. Now here we're looking toward Three Forks. We're about a mile away, 5 miles now from camp number 2. I should mention that camp number 2 was actually upstream from where the monument is on the bluff that marks the site of the Sand Creek battleground. And then from that camp, Lieutenant Bonsall marks a line which is equivalent to about 2 miles according to the rest of his measurements for the village site area, showing it upstream even yet from there, which would make our discovery exactly the same as what Lieutenant Bonsall is saying. So we'll head up toward Three Forks. We're just going to walk the Bonsall Trail here just for a little bit to get kind of a feel for it and everything. Today it's really pretty hard to see this trail from the ground, but my dad had agricultural aerial photo maps, were done in 1936. We'll look at those in a little bit. But from those, the trail is very clear. And also, you can see it on Google Earth. From outer space, you can see this trail, which is kind of interesting. But right here on the ground, sometimes it's just kind of hard to see it. And I've got, every once in a while I have posts marked along here, steel posts I drove in where I found an artifact of some sort, so I'm sure documented this really well, being the trail, because back then they didn't have any littering laws. They was eating some peaches or beans or whatever, and they just throw their can out the back of the wagon. Anyway, stuff like that you find and can document the location of the trail. Now, as we head on toward Three Forks, we can see some of these posts and different markers I have to mark the trail, so we know we're right on it here. And every once in a while you see a little difference in vegetation here, and that's another way you can tell where these old trails were. This goes back to 1868. Just 4 years after Sand Creek, 3.5 years actual, because this was Lieutenant Bonsall came out in June, and Sand Creek, that was in November of '64. About 3 miles an hour, so he would make a whole lot of real fast time. A lot of things look very similar. He said it was cool that morning, and here it is, all a little after 6 o'clock. Really pleasant, cool, just really nice out here this morning. Looks very, very similar to what Lieutenant Bonsall would have seen. Very, very little difference. Crickets in the background, once in a while a meadowlark, prairie dogs. This is Lieutenant Bonsall's map as he drew it, and this is called a strip map. Not a lot of detail to the creek and so forth and so on. Mostly it was measurements from one camp to the other, and he was on his way to Cheyenne Wells, so it's just a lot of measurements showing from one point to the other, and then along the left it shows times he left and a little bit about the weather and so forth, and on the right a little bit more details of what the land was like and the grass and so forth. And but we could, why don't we just start down here, and I don't know if you can pick that up okay, a little bit zoomed in maybe. And down here, this would be Old Fort Lyon. This is where he started from, and Old Fort Lyon is just west of like Big Timbers Museum or KLMR, 287 there. If you just go west there, about past the feed yard, maybe about 7 miles or so, and then it's over to the south on the north bank of the Arkansas River is where this was. So, but that's where he started, right here, and then he come up and he talked about going through some low basins that would probably fill up with water, and I think that could be the lakes out there north of Lamar. And but then he comes on up, and his first camp is, he calls it Greenwood's Camp, and it's pretty close to where Rush Creek and Sand Creek come together. And he camps there for the night, and then next morning he heads on up on Sand Creek. You see Big Sand Creek is over here, and his trail is kind of off of the creek a ways. But then he makes camp here, and he calls this one Camp Number 2. The one earlier he called Greenwood's Camp, and Camp Number 2. And then he shows just above Camp Number 2, just a little bit, he shows a line here. And according to the rest of his lines and distances and so forth, this would be about 2 miles, is what this line would represent, which more than likely would be the length of the Indian camp, because he was there just 3.5 years later, so probably still the camp was destroyed and burned, so it'd probably still be quite visible where the teepees had been and the ones that burned and so forth. And so, and then he says over here, he talks about it being 6 miles from Camp Number 2 to Three Forks. And so that's very significant. We'll get out our other map a little bit later and show how this correlates with the Sand Creek site and where the monument is and everything. And that took him about, he left 5:30 in the morning, arrived at Three Forks 7:30, 6 miles in 3 hours. So, and then from there, and we'll show this up there a little bit better, at Three Forks the road does fork. One of them comes off here, off this way to the northeast, and Another one forks off here to the a little bit to the northwest. Then another one just kind of follows Sand Creek up more or less. Of course, to Denver. There was no Colorado Springs at that time, so at some point they would have cut off and gone to Denver. Now this is our work map that we had for. We spent a lot of time just studying these aerial maps for things, and my dad had these. They were 1936 aerial maps that were for agricultural purposes, but these old trails really show up really good. And we'll just start the trail. We'll get a closer view of it here, but Three Forks is right here, and you can see the old trail all the way through here. Here's where we were a little bit ago. You can see where the trail cuts through this farm, this field. It goes on down, and it cuts through a corner of another field, and just kind of it comes on down and follows Sand Creek all the way down through here. And so now we'll kind of go in on some closer things here for just a minute. Let's look at Three Forks a little closer. Okay, here's Three Forks. This is the trail that angled off toward Old Cheyenne Wells. Now, Old Cheyenne Wells was north of present-day Cheyenne Wells, probably 5 miles or so. It was just a kind of an outcropping of rock and a place of water where people could find water. And so that angled off here. And then this road angled off in this direction a little bit toward the old Butterfield Trail. And this one just kind of came down to Sand Creek and followed Sand Creek along the way. So that was called Three Forks. This is a closer up view, might make it a little more clear. So the old trail come along here. Here's Three Forks. The trail toward Old Cheyenne Wells. The trail toward the old Butterfield Trail. And the trail through here to Sand Creek. Now, one thing in studying these old maps you got to be aware of is sometimes fence lines, but this dark line through here is an old fence line. Of course, it's kind of obvious, I guess, because it's so straight that it's pretty well a guarantee that that's an old fence line. Also up here is a straight line here, and here also again is an old fence line. So you kind of got to ignore those things. And this is a real high ridge area here, so you see all these lines coming down toward the creek. A lot of that is just kind of drainage areas where when it rained, where water would run down toward the creek. So you also kind of got to be aware of those and be able to pick out what is a trail and what isn't. So anyway, Three Forks right here is very, very clear on this old map. Now, so we need to measure down 6 miles toward where his camp number 2 is, now that we know for sure where Three Forks is. So each one of these is a section. From these 3 sections, that'd be equivalent to about 3 miles, is 8 inches. So 16 inches is what we'd need then for 6 miles. So if we just lay this yardstick here and at Three Forks, come down 16 inches, which would put us at this point right here. Now, you probably didn't go, I mean, you know, it's pretty straight. That trail had very few bends, so it'd be very little difference here. Just a straight line the way a crow would fly. But 16 inches would be putting it about in here. Somewhere in this area right here. Well, probably on this side of the creek. It was where he probably camped. Now, notice something. Monument being right up here. And the Sand Creek, says November 29th and 30th Sand Creek Battle of 1864. Something along that line is what the monument says right there. But his camp is upstream from here, right about in here. And then, if you recall on the map he drew a line representing about 2 miles, and it started above his camp a little bit, so maybe right about here, and for 2 miles, which would put it right about here. And that's the exact area we were finding lots and lots of Indian campground stuff, teepee stuff, in this whole region right in through here. So we feel that absolutely is our Rosetta Stone of proof, the Lieutenant Bonsall map. We indeed did find the real site, Black Kettle's camp right in here. Well, here we are, we're arriving at Three Forks, and we're just pretty well on schedule. Lieutenant Bonsall got here at 7:30. It's about, we're a little ahead of time. It's about 20 after 7. Yeah, pretty good though. Okay, we're just coming right into Three Forks right here. So at this point, Lieutenant Bonsall, he's got to make a decision. He sees 3 trails here. We had put up a sign here, but there wasn't any sign back then. So he's got to decide which trail is he going to take. The one off to the right, the one straight ahead. Or is he going to turn and head on down Sand Creek? Okay, Lieutenant Bonsall, when he got to Three Forks, he had these little remarks to make. He said at Three Forks, the left-hand road crosses the creek and leads in the direction of Denver. An ox train from Arkansas, bound for Denver, had lately passed over this road. And then if we look and turn to the right, and these roads aren't real, you know, they're not real visible today, but we just located them according to artifacts and the maps, Google Earth, and things where he was able to mark them. But as he looked, the right-hand road is the direct and shortest road leading to Cheyenne Wells. But thinking it bore too much to the east, we took the center road. So let's come back over here and pan back to our left again to the center road. And he says, which after following for a mile was lost. We then went due north by the compass, over a high prairie, with gradual ascent, very little broken, and struck the old Butterfield Stage Road 8 miles from Three Forks, and 16 miles from Cheyenne Wells. No wood or water, grass is poor. Well, we took this information that Lieutenant Bonsall had here and wanted just to figure how accurate was he with his mileage. Was his mileage accurate? You know, who knows in these old wagons how accurate they were. So we just did what he said, and here from Three Forks, we drew a line just following this trail, just like he did, for 1 mile. And it goes off a little bit to the northwest. And after a mile, then he said he followed it by the compass due north. So then we went due north. And we did all this from Google Earth, and where you can take measurements and everything and do real accurate things with mileage. And so we went due north and struck the old Butterfield Stage Route 8 miles from Three Forks. So here from Three Forks, he went a mile along the road and 7 more miles due north by the compass. And then from the compass, he went followed the Butterfield Stage Road to Cheyenne Wells. That was just a straight direct shot right to Cheyenne Wells. 16 miles. And we measured all this out by Google Earth, and his miles were exactly right to the miles. So this helped us feel good about his positioning of camp number 2, where that was here from Three Forks. That was 6 miles, he said. So because his accuracy was so good from here to Cheyenne Wells distances, then we feel very, very confident that his placement of camp number 2 was also accurate at 6 miles above the Sand Creek Battleground Monument, considerable, maybe a mile or so, which showed Black Kettle's village, beginning about a good strong mile above the monument for another 2 miles, just as we had documented our findings. Then he went ahead to say that the road, good but hilly, very little used, found plenty of good water and ponds on the right-hand side of the road, no wood, grass was good. And then on his return trip from Cheyenne Wells on June 19th, he says, we took the road farthest east. So this is the one he would have thought he was kind of thinking about taking the first time, but thought it bore a little bit too much east. We took and left the main Denver road about 300 yards west of the station and followed the old Butterfield road for 4 or 5 miles, then returned to the left. It is difficult to tell where this road leaves. It is not plainly marked until you have gone some 200 yards from the other road. From here to the crossing of Sand Creek, a distance of 26 miles, being 4 miles shorter than the road by which we went, the road is in excellent condition. There is no part of it so rough as to prevent any army team from traveling. No wood or water until you reach Three Forks. The grass is good. We have now gone the middle trail, 1 mile, like Bonsall said. And this is where he said he lost the trail, couldn't see it anymore. So from this point, I think he realized he wasn't going the right direction toward Cheyenne Wells. So he decided to go due north by the compass. So if we turn the camera a little bit more off, a little more due north, right in through there. Yeah, that's about how he went. Right through there, and then from there, Butterfield Trail, from there on to Cheyenne Wells. The trail from Three Forks that went to Denver, following Sand Creek. They had a nice little surprise down here because there's a nice little watering hole. Lieutenant Bonsall did talk about how there was a good watering source at Three Forks, so no doubt this is where he's talking about.
All right, we're back out here walking the trail to Three Forks, and we're out here at the Bone Meadow Ranch where part of the Lost Sand Creek site is located. And you can see we've got our Three Forks sign back up here, and you can see that at Three Forks where the trail breaks off, and it marks Three Forks. It marks the trail to Fort Lyon, the trail to Old Cheyenne Wells, trail to Denver, and also there's the trail to Butterfield. And you see all of those are marked here on this sign. And this would have been the trail that Lieutenant Bonsall took when he came out here in 1868. And since he was able to mark that spot of Three Forks, we can actually see that on satellite imagery maps, so we can verify the spot where artifacts are found at the Lost Sand Creek site and measure, and it matches right up with his map, as you see earlier in this video.